Hello guys, welcome back. This is actually my first video on this channel. My name is Climate Insight, and basically what I do on this channel is I'll go over weather information that's pretty significant or important. I can also go over minor things that happen as well. It's just whenever I post, like if there's something going on, I'll most likely make a video about it if I can. So now that I got out of the way, welcome to my channel. I hope you guys enjoy this video. I feel like this is a very good first video to create about the El Niño watch that has been issued by the Climate Prediction Center recently. And El Niño is on its way. What does that mean for the tropics, guys? What does that mean? Well, what that means is a splitting jet stream in the middle of the United States. So we have a Pacific jet that strengthens along the low pressure that usually sets in either south or north of the jet stream. Usually there's two of them. A weaker one down here, and then usually there's a stronger one up here, which causes the jet stream to not really be so relaxed. Actually, no, it causes it to be more relaxed in a way that it splits in half, and there's two subtropical jet streams. The one up north, usually, this jet stream right here is usually holding extremely cold Arctic air, while ridging usually sets in around the central west area of the United States. And typically there's also another ridge that sets up in the desert southwest. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's dry there, because actually during a El Nino winter it's pretty wet there. What it does though is it causes a secondary dip in the jet stream, which basically will bring the cold temperatures that were already up here even more south. So in that case, there's extremely cold air above this jet stream. This jet stream will hold moderately cold air to warm air usually during the wintertime. And when that jet stream does dip, it'll bring cold air to the south, into like Alabama, Georgia, Florida area, all of that good stuff. Sometimes it can even dip into the Caribbean islands, but that's pretty rare usually most of the time. Although cold fronts can make it well past Dominican Republic, as noticeable like deep into the winter by the way. So yeah, this is usually what happens during the winter time. During the summertime, there really is no Pacific jet, or at least it's very weak. And that's also what creates pockets of moisture in the Gulf of Mexico that are very close land forming, and they'll hit the United States as a pretty strong storm, because the Gulf of Mexico is usually baking at this time of the year, so that'll cause hurricanes to be generally much stronger in the Gulf. Caribbean this year probably won't be as active as the Gulf due to the increased shear from the El Nino, the westerly winds, they say. So during so this is actually a statement from the Climate Prediction Center. I basically rephrased this off the Climate Prediction Center into more, you know, suitable words for this type of audience. I don't know what my audience will be like. You guys are into weather, you're not, you don't know anything about weather, you've never even checked the weather forecast in your life. Well, this video is pretty good because it will give you some good information about the upcoming summer, fall, winter conditions that are during a El Nino. But currently right now we are only seeing ENSO neutral conditions continuing through our spring, followed by a 62% chance of El Nino developing during May, which is in 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. So there's a pretty good chance that an El Nino forms during this month of May. Okay, there's an even greater chance it forms during July. There's a little bit of a less chance it forms during I'm sorry, I meant June. There's a little bit more of a chance that it hits in July though, because we do have May and July are like the opposite ends of the spectrum. While June is probably the month where we're going to see the transition to El Nino, because they actually have forecasted a point two increase in the SSTs, like the general average SSTs. So of the equatorial Pacific's Nino status. So what we're seeing currently right now is a very slight increase towards El Nino, but it hasn't been like a not consistent increase. It's been a very, very consistent increase, this ENSO status. And we were just in a cooler neutral about 2 weeks ago. Now we're already tiptoeing towards El Nino status. So I do think there's a very good chance we get an El Nino during May, even greater during July, but we will see what happens, guys. So basically, the latest weekly Nino 3.4 index was 0 degrees Celsius, which is about as neutral as it gets. That was last week. but the Niño 1.2 index was 2.7 degrees Celsius. Now, if you guys don't know what the 1.2 region is, if you guys can see my mouse, it is this area right next to South America near these islands right here. That's the general 1.2 region as you get towards these surface temperatures. 3.4 region around here. When you get a little past Hawaii, it's the 4 region. And usually it's much like, usually it's a lot different during the El Nino. But once it's consistent for a year, that's when the El Nino starts to widen out and it becomes consistent with each other. All the separate El Nino like territories, I guess. Usually the 1.2, 3, and 4 will all be consistent with each other if it's a long-lasting El Nino or La Nina. Like what we saw the last 3 years have been La Nina. So this is a pretty crazy event that's happening, and it's definitely going to change the weather from what it used to look like the past 4 years. Now we did have an El Nino about 5 years ago. We had a very weak El Nino that happened in 2018, and that definitely changed the weather scheme up, especially severe weather. It definitely really heightened the severe weather that year. And then after that, the La Nina kicked in, plain severe weather decreased, Dixie Alley severe weather increased, however, due to the more wetter conditions in the springtime during La Nina. So, the most recent IRI plume, which basically the IRI plume, I included it in the last slide of this, but it basically shows all the different members of the IRI model, and it's another model too, I just don't know the name of it, but it basically calculates the number that the El Nino will get to. It usually ranges from 0.5 to 4. It hasn't gone above 4 in a while. It's usually a generational event when it does that, because it doesn't happen very often. But it's actually forecasting a 2.5 to 3 degrees Celsius El Nino this summer. Or this winter, sorry. This winter. That's pretty crazy. And that's such like a huge increase, it's insane. But yeah, as we get into this El Nino pattern, you guys will see. This is generally the conditions you get during a winter. You get the secondary jet stream that cuts off south. That's typically your subtropical jet. Usually it's wetter than normal all along this jet because the jet could be up here, it could go like this, it could go like this, how it's depicting in the graph. That's the most common area it usually goes through. And then it could even go down here towards the country Mexico, and then the southern Caribbean islands. It could even go towards Puerto Rico, typically pretty rare. And usually that's where it is during a La Nina, or near South America in the the tropical inner convergence zone. That's what it's called. Sorry. And usually in the north, right here, we have the warmer than normal conditions. Due to this I don't think this is the subtropical jet stream. This is just the temperate jet stream, the one that's usually north of this one during an El Nino. This one doesn't carry much precip with it, although it can in some cases. That's why there's an increased amount of severe weather, sometimes in the Northeast and sometimes northern Michigan, and even sometimes in the Midwest, but generally the Midwest is drier than normal. It's when you start getting towards the subtropical jet is when it gets wetter. So that's how an El Nino pattern sets in. Usually this pocket over here, like I said earlier, holds a bunch of extremely cold air that can sometimes be released. It just depends on the pattern type and what day and where the high pressure is, where a lot of different dynamics, So that's how that goes. So this is the El Nino influence during the summer or in fall, where we have the tropical systems. And during an El Nino, there's more hurricanes in the Pacific due to less vertical wind shear. It's the westerlies that are pushing towards Mexico into the Atlantic. But there's usually less of it because of the warmer air over here and the low pressure. And the low pressure generally doesn't push shear towards the Mexico shore. So that's in result gets more hurricanes. And there's also more increased chance of storms forming near Hawaii and out here in the Gulf due to it being warm and wet, which is as favorable as it gets pretty much. And in the Atlantic side over here, we have fewer hurricanes due to stronger vertical wind shear due to these westerlies pushing against Mexico and Central America, and greater atmospheric stability. I'm guessing that's because of the consistent amount of shear pushing through, but usually the Gulf of Mexico and the eastern starboard are usually unaffected by El Nino. There's very low like correlation with that whatsoever. Usually the El Nino is affecting the main development region, which is down here more towards the intertropical convergence zone. And then we have the Caribbean. The northern Caribbean, the southern Caribbean, everywhere in the Caribbean is pretty much going to be sheared most of the time. However, there could be some points in September where there's not as much shear due to the westerlies weakening. Because we actually saw this last year where there were more storms in the Pacific because there wasn't as much shear pushing against the shore, and they haven't yet converted to westerly winds. So that's what actually caused the less shear. Excuse me. So that's usually what happens during the summer with an El Nino. We have these three different regions right here that are pretty important, and usually up here it's cold and dry because of the jet stream dipping, and you can see how that would affect the weather. But do not get me wrong, we've had some very strong storms during El Nino happen in the Atlantic. Like Dorian was a good example. It formed, I'd have to guess right here. It went north of the islands, found a pocket of extremely high ocean heat content that hasn't been touched at all because there were barely any storms in 2019. It touched that pocket and it grew so big. I think it got to 190 miles per hour, if I'm not mistaken. 185. It was actually forecasted to hit Florida, but gladly it didn't. It actually, unfortunately, hit the Mexicos and it was stalled over the Bahamas. It was stalled over the Bahamas, and eventually, it just created such strong currents, such strong surge, such strong winds. Everything was pretty much demolished on the island in 2019. And that was a super big hurricane. It's still remembered today as a really bad hurricane to date. And people in Bahamas are still recovering from this event, and it's very lucky if they even have a house. Yeah, lots of things happened that year, but just Dorian was one of them. Now here we have the NMME SST anomaly. These are basically sea surface temperatures in August, September, October. And this is what they're forecasting for basically the fall season of 2023. And from what it looks like, the 1.2 region is actually pretty consistent with 3.4 region, which is good. And then it slowly decreases as you get towards the Western Atlantic. Western Pacific, sorry. And then we have, I would say that's about 1.75 to 2 max in the 3.4 region. In the 1 plus 2 region, we have about, I'd say 2.5 max right there. So they're forecasting a pretty strong El Nino right here. That's the NME. There's another model too. I could not find it though for this video. I'm very sorry about that, but this is a pretty accurate forecast in itself, so it will probably verify, most likely. And then here we have the top analog since 1966, based on 30-day CSST data, which is the sea surface temperatures. And these are the 5 dates that are most consistent with the sea surface temperatures right now. I mean right now. This is not in the future, this isn't like anything. This is from March 22nd to 21st April. This is a monthly analysis that updates for every month. This is the current, oh sorry about that. This is the 1.2 region right here, which has warmed up significantly, and I mean significantly. It's already almost in the 3s. Which, actually the NMME model was actually suggesting that it would decrease and balance out with the rest of the 3.4 region, which is probably what will happen. But that's the 30-day mean SST anomaly. It basically indicates the past 30-day average mean temperatures in the equatorial and temperate oceans. A 0.5 Celsius increase indicates El Nino conditions, which we have not yet reached consecutively in the El Nino ENSO region. And the second one, we have top 5 analogs for current sea surface temperature analysis. So these years are the top 5 years that correlate the most with the top 5 April analogs, which these are basically ENSO analogs of the top 5 Aprils that are most consistent to this date, 2023. And these dates down here are actually dates that are most similar to 2023's current conditions. This indicates the top years that are most likely current conditions in the equatorial temperate oceans. It has the less resolution. So yes, this model actually has less resolution than the CDAS model. That's because it's a more, zoomed out. Like, it's more like average. There was more data put into it that was averaged out. So it's less accurate and has less resolution. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't use the model. It's a pretty good source of data anyway. Next, we have the tropical cyclone frequency anomaly from the top 5 analogs to the current conditions right now in 2023. These are the most common. I believe that's measuring. I don't actually know what this is measuring, but usually I think it might be a wind shear map because it's the tropical cyclone frequency. So I'm guessing blue means more frequency. Actually, I think red means more frequency. Sorry, red means more frequency. We actually have a couple of tracks from the main development region, which are most most likely going out to sea as depicted right here. We have some activity in the Caribbean when it's not sheared to death, and we have some activity in the Gulf, which is pretty standard during El Niño. That's probably going to be the most active region we have, due to it not being affected by the ENSO as much as other regions. Next, we have the official NOAA ENSO probabilities. These were issued in January. I believe there's an updated one, but basically right now they're anticipating a small chance of El Niño, and we're already in, yeah, this is around May time. This is pretty accurate to the one that's currently forecasted. It's pretty much the same, except the La Nina chances are way lower, pretty much near zero over here, with El Nino conditions being a lot higher than neutral. Although the analog numbers seem a little low here, guys, it's for a reason because these oh shit, sorry. So yeah, this is actually what's the currently predicted the next 30 days. This goes by monthly, so these are each 30-day intervals. We are currently in store for a moderate strong El Nino though, which yeah, like I said earlier, a 0.15 to 20 increase has been consistent each month. And this graph is kind of showing I guess, the probability correlation with the increase in time math. So that's pretty big, guys. That's a pretty huge thing going on. Now here we have the seasonal forecast from the Colorado State University, the average storms per year, and then we have last year's data. Now last year is pretty much as bad average as it gets. Pretty much. It was a pretty average season, two below average season in major hurricane wise. But we did have 8 hurricanes out of 14 storms. 6 of them were tropical storms, 8 of them were hurricanes. We had more hurricanes than tropical storms last year, due to we actually had record sea surface temperatures last year in the Gulf, the Caribbean, the Atlantic in general was hot. It's though more towards the Northeast where it got cooler, but we had a record year last year in a way. Not the way you guys might be thinking this way, but sea surface temperature wise, we just had trouble with a lot of the shear. A lot of tuts kept forming and pretty much blocking the chances of any storms forming. So that's what happened there. And CSU is actually predicting a slightly below average season, very slightly below average, which is pretty standard with El Nino, obviously, as they were currently predicting a weak El Nino. So this is a pretty standard forecast, I would say. Now, if this El Nino forms quicker than anticipated, this forecast might go down, because obviously that would entail fewer Caribbean storms, which is pretty much what makes these values go down. We're still gonna have hurricanes this year, guys. Do not let your guard down at all. And you can't actually predict the tracks right now, but you can kind of see an increased region of tracks if you go on preset models that go way into the future, which are usually very accurate to not accurate at all. But they're still cool to look at. They can still depict stuff, and that's a pretty good way of forecasting this year. Now, I would like to thank you guys for watching this video. I basically went into details about the El Nino forming. And thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like. That would be appreciated. I'm sorry if I did go a little bit slower in this video. I am kind of tired right now, making my first video, which I should not be tired at all. So if I did stutter a little bit or mispronounce something or misword something, I'm very sorry about that. I hopefully will have that fixed next video, but I am going to plan on getting more sleep before I film next. And the next video I would assume would probably be about the tropics. might be a regional thing. Like this channel is Climate Insight of the entire U.S. and sometimes we go out internationally too. But I am centered currently in Florida, so I might go over Florida weather a tiny bit more than the rest of the states, but that's just because I live in Florida and I'm used to saying it a lot and used to talking about the weather there. So that's on my part. I'm very sorry about that, but I will try to cover as much as I can, as much as possible. But yes, guys, if you guys enjoyed the El Nino update or forecast in a way, El Nino is on its way. What does that mean for the tropics, as what I explained in the video? Hope you guys have a good night. I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure you subscribe, and you can join my friend's Discord server in the description, where we basically talk about the tropics non-stop. Like, there's always some sort about tropics in there. And even at this time of the year when it's inactive, we still have a bunch of people talking about the tropics in there. So it's a very cool server to join. You can even check out the website, you can integrate your weather station, you can make posts about weather, you can talk to other members on the website, and then is that where you can join the Discord server. The dude who owns the website, Evan, is constantly working on it, so he's trying to make sure it's good as possible for everybody to enjoy, which is a very good thing. And I appreciate his work, and that's why I'm ending the video off. Have a good night, guys.